Hello there, good evening, and welcome to episode 12 of Nothing Else Mattress, a music podcast that's setting out to try and establish what we think are the 100 greatest albums ever released. To do that, we've been reviewing the latest Rolling Stone 100 list and voting albums in and out on that. We're now into the top 50, I think, so I think we've reviewed 55, and from memory, I think 35, I think, have been reviewed in, so we're still around that 60% mark. And we will then fill the gaps once we get to the end of the list. And to do that, we've obviously got some more friends coming on each podcast. So tonight, who do we have? We have John. Good evening, John.
Good evening, Brian.
How you doing, mate?
I'm very well, thank you.
Correct me if I'm wrong, that looks like a Vivienne Westwood sweatshirt.
Oh,
No?
yeah, you've got an eye for fashion, I have to say. Well spotted.
Never lose it. George, how you doing, mate?
Not bad at all. Thank you, Brian.
A good man. And we have a special guest tonight, which is great. And our guest tonight is the editor, author, and member of Artisan and Vulture Party, Dickson Telfer. Dickson, good evening.
Good evening. Thanks very much for having me.
You're very welcome. Big fan of Vulture Party for sure. Cracking
Thanks.
band. If Arcade Fire were born in Fife, mate, they'd be Vulture Party, wouldn't they? So,
Five.
well, Central Belt.
So anywhere beyond Greenock and the port is
Anywhere is
Five.
Yeah.
anyway you can't see the water, right? Yeah,
I like that though. Should maybe put that like as a strap line somewhere.
I'm available for any bad quote you want. So
If Arcade Fire were born in Fife.
Okay, so get 5 to review tonight. We'll crack on and we'll have a chat. Okay, first one on the list tonight is Prince. So number 45 on the Rolling Stone list was Prince with Sign on the Times, and I'll just read you the little blurb and then we can have a chat. So he'd fired his band, and his latest movie, Under the Cherry Moon, had flopped. Just 3 years after Purple Rain, Prince was in the market for a comeback, so he recorded one of the great albums of the 80s. Times is best known for the apocalyptic title track, the Brontosaurus funk of Housequake, and the gorgeous If I Was Your Girlfriend. Yet the simplest moments are unforgettable. The Sweet Jane style guitar plea of The Cross, the Stax revamp on Slow Love, a jilted girl's sadness, I could never take the place of your man. I hate the word experiment, Prince said. It sounds like something you didn't finish. Here he finished. So that was the review. It was released in March 87.
87.
Okay, so John, Prince, Sign the Times, mate. What we thinking?
Yeah, I was pretty blown away with this actually. I really like it. 16 songs, which 80 minutes. I looked at that right away and I thought, oh, this is pushing it. This is pushing it. Because we've had this talk quite a bit around those sort of 10 to 12 songs, 45 minutes. That's probably your best lengthy album. But absolutely loved it. I think there was only one duff track on it for me. So out of 16 songs, that's pretty good going. Title track itself, loved it. The production's really crisp. We've got that falsetto vocal going on. All the, he just does so much, and I think it's very effortless in how it comes across. He's not trying too hard. I think there's quite a few albums that we've heard so far during this process that I just feel they're filling stuff in just for the sake of it. This isn't the case here. You've got funk, you've got soul, you've got pop. I think it's just really fantastic. And I think also as you look at it, the Revolution had disbanded. I think it was 2 or 3 different projects that got shelved to a point, and then he resurrected some of that. Some of the songs, the vocal reach, I think he had this sort of female alter ego called Camille, and you listen to those songs and you just, I think, how is that even possible to sound like that? Particularly in songs like Housequake, which I think is just amazing. But you've also got some really breezy pop songs in there, like Starfish and Coffee, Playing the Sunshine. Just songs like that they're quite throwaway pop songs, but they fit in fantastically well. I think did you mention Slow Love there, Brian?
I did in the
I think
the
you
intro.
maybe mentioned that in the introduction. But if if you're after a bit of action a Saturday night with a good partner, you get that on. It's a pure shagging song, is it not?
Is Marion about tonight? We could ask for a view on
Good God, no. But I did, let's just say I did play it Saturday night, but that's all I'm saying.
Right, okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I think we'll move on quickly. So it was so it was I think you're right, there was a whole bunch of stuff recorded. This was his 9th studio album. He'd had Purple Rain, obviously, which, you know, smashed it, and I think that comes on later in the list. And he then had a couple of what I think are amazing albums, but weren't as commercially successful as Purple Rain. And then he sort of come back with this, but he had this sort of triple album idea thing, didn't he?
That's right. Yep.
And he's then sort of cherry picked it and knocked it down into a double, I think.
I think the record company balked at the idea of a triple album, and they got to a compromise and agreed on a double album, and that's basically what you've got here. And as I say, I think for me, pretty much every track stands the test of time. I think there was only one that I just thought, nah, that's a duffer.
What was the one that was a duffer? Do you remember?
The Ballad of Dorothy Parker.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
I quite like that as well.
It's weird. It's got it's weird. It sounds weird, doesn't it?
Well, I just didn't do it for me, but yeah, I thought it was a really strong album. So
brilliant. Thanks very much. That's a good kick-off. We'll come back to a couple of bits, I guess. George, I think you're a bit of a Prince fan, I think, from some of the Twitter chat.
Absolutely. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's my favourite Prince album. That would be its predecessor, Parade, in 1986, because that was an album that I just listened to constantly. But I would say it's probably his best work overall. Incredibly, I actually made the Revolution redundant just before he made this. And then he goes off in this flight of fancy, Stevie Wonder style, you know, I'm going to play everything on the album. And it's an absolute masterpiece, I think. Incredibly inventive, melodic, groovy. It's basically the roadmap for every single R&B based pop album that followed. And when he wasn't musing on his favourite subject, sex, he was displaying virtuoso chops as a player and a band leader. The title track's probably up there, top 3 Prince songs of all time. If I was your girlfriend, I could never take the place of your man. They'd be career highs for any other artist, to be honest with you. And as John was saying there about the double album, normally we find that with a lot of artists who bring out the double album, there's a lot of flab. There isn't on this.
Is that because it's so varied, do you think, George? Is it the variation in it?
It's a guy at the top of his game, and he's very confident, knows what he's doing. He's got phenomenal pop chops, and he knows he's going to deliver, and he did deliver. And it's I still can't get my head around that he's not here anymore. I really can't. It's like almost, I wouldn't say it's Bowie level, but it's no far off for me. Guy still had so much to offer.
And was this? Do you think this was his last great album, or did he? So Love Sexy was pretty good.
Sexy was pretty good. I really like Love Sexy, and he did things sporadically after that. But this is probably the last in the run of classic Prince albums. You know, I think bands sometimes, it's very rare for bands to hit, more than 4 or 5 like absolute killer albums on the bounce. Unless you're a diehard fan, you're going to that loves everything they do. Looking as a sort of outsider, I think, I've talked to John before about, the run that Echo and the Bunnymen, for instance, went on in the mid-80s, early mid-80s, and it was like a stellar run. U2 had a similar kind of run, and I think Prince from Purple Rain to, maybe Love Sexy, but definitely this one, a great run of killer albums. I think the Stones have done it as well. They did it with the Jimmy Miller stuff, which we'll go on to a bit later on.
Okay.
No, it's a fantastic record. I had a chant. I was with a girl who was a big Prince fan at the time, and she had bought tickets for us to go to Paris to see him. when he toured this this album. But unfortunately, I'd just broken up with her a couple of days before, she told me this, and she tried to get me back by saying, I've got tickets for Paris. And it was very close. I nearly sacked the girl I was with to go back to the other girl because of, got to see Prince in Paris. So
Yeah.
I sort of regretted that. And I never saw him live, but I did hear him. I heard him play, but I never saw him because he used to, after gigs, go to either the Camden Palace, the ones in London anyway, go to either the Camden Palace or he'd go to the Electric Ballroom. And the Electric Ballroom was right, literally, basically, there was a wall that separated the basement of the Electric Ballroom from the machine chamber at Camden Town Underground Station.
Yep.
So when he was playing and he would go to the Electric Ballroom afterwards, I would go and turn the escalators off during the night and just listen to Prince through the wall.
Because
So,
he played into like 2, 3 in the morning, didn't he? He had
yeah,
these.
he'd play way into the early hours in these after gigs. So I heard them, but I never saw them, sadly.
I did manage to see him a couple of times, which you maybe mentioned. So it was successful, but in relative terms, nothing like as successful as previous records. And I was actually surprised that it was only number one in Switzerland, of all places.
Really?
Yeah, so 6 in Billboard, 10 in UK, and sold a chunk of records and double.
Yeah.
I guess part of the feedback was being a double album. Of course, it was quite expensive because it's all pre-streaming and what have you. So that probably didn't help.
He could have done a triple, and it would have probably worked. We'd have probably got away with it.
Yeah,
Not many
absolutely.
people can do a triple, but he would have.
Yeah, I'd agree with that totally. Dickson, how are you coming into this with Prince? Are you a fan or?
It's an interesting question because I like some of his material, but not all of it, and I did struggle with this a little bit. So I'm going to go against the grain here.
So why do you think you struggled? Or what did you like about it? Maybe, and then maybe what did you not so like?
Okay, yeah. What I liked about it, things that have been said already. It is really well produced. It's groovy. There's some lovely bass lines in there. Vocally, you can't fault it. It's up there, or he's up there with one of the best vocalists we'll ever hear. So all that is really good, but I found it cheesy. That's the short of it, and cringy, and too long.
Okay.
It's a double album. I was pleased that it wasn't a triple album. Even the song length, and maybe I overanalyze things, but I felt that some songs, especially the ones that weren't massive hits, they just fizzled out a little bit. There was nothing there that was memorable in terms of endings, and I quite like it when a song maybe builds up to something more interesting, or it's got like a quirky or memorable outro. Not that it has to be the case for every song, but I felt that none of these songs did that. The only one that had an outro that was quite different to the rest of the song, not that it changed like tempo or key signature or anything like that, but If I Was Your Girlfriend. But that's where it became excruciatingly, like almost uncomfortable. Like I've got some of the lyrics here, right? There's a bit where he says, "Would you let me see you naked then? Would you let me give you a bath if I was your girlfriend? Would you let me tickle you so hard you'd laugh and laugh?" I mean, that sounds, it just makes me cringe. And would you let me kiss you there if I was your girlfriend? Down there where it counts. I'll do it so good. I swear I'll drink every ounce. And yeah, I just found it deeply uncomfortable. And that's the thing. He is a fantastic artist and a great musician and a very underrated guitarist. But it creeps me out. Like, it looks like he's got a kind of like glued on beard. And just some of the stuff that I've heard about him, like I read Sinead O'Connor's book, and I'm not saying that everything she writes is spot on, because I know obviously she's had her issues.
Yeah.
But from what she reported, he wasn't too happy about some aspect of Nothing Compares to You, and invited her around the house And as part of her visit, he engaged her in a pillow fight, but he put heavy objects in the pillow with the intention to hurt her because of what he had done with his song. But what she had done was made it a massive hit. It just made no sense. And it just tied in with that kind of strange looking guy that wanted to be like a squiggle for so many years and then go back to being Prince after that. It just doesn't sit too well with me. It's all about Flight of the Conchords, some of the lyrics and some of the delivery as well. I guess probably Flight of the Conchords got some inspiration from Prince, as well as the Pet Shop Boys and such like.
So is this bit about the for want of a better word, the kind of campness of him? If you think about, I don't know, Little Richard, for example, going back quite a way, had a lot of that in what he'd done. He was a showman to the absolute extremes, to the point of being almost kind of asexual. And Prince has got a lot of that. So as an artist, he has a lot of that in him. And then as an individual, we've had this chat, guys, haven't we, about the art and the artist and the art. What do you do with it? And there's not really a red line on that one, but we've had to call it a few times on I think, George, you gave Van Morrison a bit of a kicking, but
yeah, but
still,
he is.
Yeah, but I think we still voted him in, didn't we? Because we thought he was just was a bad guy. He wasn't doing bad things, if that makes sense.
But there's a whole bunch of people who've mentioned. James Brown, for instance, was a fucking horrendous human being, as was Chuck Berry, and there's a bunch of these guys that are horrible humans.
What's that?
I've never had a berry. I've just who's this?
I thought you were doing Saturday Night Fever there. I thought you were doing.
I was just practicing for a joke.
The Chuck Berry.
Yeah.
So if this was just to finish on that, Dickson, if this was the Purple Rain album being reviewed on the list, would you feel that you'd come on and say much the same, or would the 10 songs, one album, would that maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you took Sign of the Times, maybe not the best comparison, but you took Sign of the Times and halved it in two, maybe made some of the songs a little bit shorter, had some outros that were a bit more interesting for some of the songs, then I probably would really like it. To go back to the more positive stuff, John mentioned that song, The Ballad of Dorothy Parker. I think the analog synths in that are great. Obviously, it's a song that didn't do it for him, but just the synth sound really stuck out. Sign of the Times is a masterpiece. You Got the Looks, great. The big singles off it are absolutely fantastic, apart from maybe If I Was Your Girlfriend, in my opinion. So there's plenty there that's really interesting. And what was it, 1987? So I mean, was there anything like that kicking about in 1987? I mean, probably not that much.
Not in totality, I don't think. As George says, it probably set the bar for many other things that followed. Because everyone kind of, it's a bit quality sheet. Everyone cherry picked the bits that they wanted to plagiarize and copy, but nothing really like it, I don't think, at the time. I mean, the big stuff around that time was like, I don't know, Joshua Tree and stuff like that. Sure. So it was a bit, Simple Minds. There was a lot of big stadium rock and stuff going on at the time, and he didn't even he didn't even tour this. Sorry, he didn't even tour this in America. Yeah. He just never toured it. He went to Europe and played some shows, and then they asked him to tour in America, and he said, "No, I've done that. I'm on to my next album now," because he had this prolific recording thing that he'd done. So he didn't really work it as much as I suppose you think he might have done.
Yeah,
it's interesting. But he was very proud of it. Sorry, John.
Yeah. I was going to say, I've got a little known fact about that album. Like a little known fact. It was actually, so two things. It was actually released on my 17th birthday.
How many birthdays do you have? I think this has happened pretty regular, George, hasn't it?
It has. So the first time we talked about this, it was Bitches Brew on the day I was born.
Right.
And this one came out 17 years later to the day, right? Little known fact, he actually wrote the song Hot Thing about me. And I'm kicking about when I'm 17.
I thought that when I heard that.
100%. I mean, he did change it.
If I Was Your Girlfriend about me. About you.
Right, well.
Hot Thing, what's your fantasy? What thing do you want to play with me?
Yeah, that could only be John Dickson, to be fair. That's got John written all over it. That's the sartorial elegance that he brings to the conversation. I mean, he also had, just to finish on it, you talk about that prolific stuff. So he should. Did he make the Black album before this?
No, I think it was afterwards.
Was this one after George? Was it?
You'd
So, I
Love
mean,
Sexy was released. The Black album didn't really.
He didn't
come
release
out.
it. So
No.
so he recorded it, gave
Yeah.
it the label. Label fell. This is where they fell out in effect. They says don't want to release it. There's no songs on it because it was like really heavy kind of R&B, hip hoppy type stuff. So he then went into dispute with them. But they'd actually pressed 500,000 CDs and LPs by this point, and he just blackballed it and said it's not coming out. So you know, whatever you think of him, and it came out, I think it came out 10, 15 years later, but you know, whatever you think of him, he was absolutely a man of principle about his music, but maybe
Yeah,
not
he was
about
very protective.
as an individual. And there's just stories about, you know, 6,000 or 7,000 songs in the vaults at Paisley Park and all that stuff. So, bit of a genius, I guess, in his own way, but you know, every genius is flawed, aren't they? So, I guess, you know, I did read a little quote. We've quoted Robert Christie a couple of times from the Old Village Voice, and he said at the time, Prince makes making Stevie Wonder sound like a struggling ventriloquist in the mid-80s, because obviously Wonder had his pomp and that sort of 70s run that he had, which was quite amazing. But as George said, he very much was set in the bar at that point. And nobody really liked him, I guess. Okay, not much more to add on that one. The only sort of funny thing I thought was that George mentioned Parade there, which I
love Parade.
Love it to death, right? If you've not dived into that, go and have a listen. It's amazing, right? However, the album, the film it came from,
shite, utter garbage,
wasn't quite at that level. So the song's amazing, film's terrible, and it got the, what do you call it? Is it the Golden Raspberry? You know, the opposite of the Oscars thing. So they got the Golden Raspberry that year for the worst film.
So it's honking. It's really, really bad.
It tied with Howard the Duck for the worst film of the year.
That was dreadful.
Which was an animated thing, right? So I can only imagine what he thought about that. Okay, cool. So let's see, we'll have a wee vote about that, and then we can move on. So let's see what the guys got. So we'll tell you who's not on then. So we've got Stephen was a yes, Lisa was a yes, Chris Thompson was a no.
Okay.
And David Ross was a yes, and he said something along the lines of, if anybody disagrees, I'll come and find them and sort them out, as David would. He said definitely in. It's a Stone Cold classic. Those disagreeing will be spanked with a wet plimsoll.
Okay.
Some people might like that though.
Prince, yeah. And Skin was a yes from him as well, for sure. Can't remember why Chris didn't like it, but he didn't. So what are we saying on that one? So John, what are we saying, mate? We in or out?
We're in.
John's in, thank you. George?
Big thumbs up for me.
Dickson?
I'm totally on the fence with this one. It's difficult, but I'll go for in, you know, because there are. I think
David Ross.
I think the good stuff outweighs the bad stuff just and no more. And I don't want a wet plimsoll spank off David Ross, as much as he would probably love to do it to me.
Well, you're probably not wrong. Chris Thompson said, no, it's controversial. Love the single, probably regarded as cultural high treason, but found the album a bit of a sprawling mess. Which is kind of a little bit what you're touching on there, Dickson. So,
yeah.
Okay, but I think there was pretty much everyone on that one apart from Chris, so we'll tick that one off. Cool. I also read today, actually, I was flicking the train back from Edinburgh, that he plays guitar on Like a Virgin, Madonna song, which
the Prince did.
Yeah, no idea about that. On the uncredited.
He played on a couple of Kate Bush songs as well, I'm sure.
He did, yeah. So no end to the man's
talent. Have you ever seen him on playing the George Harrison tribute? Everyone must have seen that one. That's just well, my guitar gently weeps, and then he just throws the guitar away at the end to say, there you go. I haven't
seen that.
Oh, must watch. We'll share it when we get back on the Twitter chat. We'll put it on there. It's amazing. And there's like 20 of the best guitarists that I've ever played on the stage, and he stands at the side, George, doesn't he? And just comes on and plays this.
Walks on, plays the song, he plays the guitar solo. He doesn't actually play this, he just plays the solo. Everyone's marveling at him, going, holy shit. And then at the end of the solo, he just takes his guitar off and throws it, just throws it away and walks off.
And it never turns up anywhere, does it? It's like,
Oh,
it's
it's
never
gone.
Yeah.
Just disappears, and everyone's standing going, what the fuck was that?
Was he in the huff about something, or was
No,
it just
not at all.
showmanship?
It's just a statement, you know. It's
No.
like, check this out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Phenomenal.
But he obviously passed. I mean, I think we've got another Prince one to do, so we'll maybe touch on that. But when he, on his last tour, he hadn't been well for some of it, cancelled a few shows because it was like a piano tour thing he did.
Yeah.
But the last
I've
two
seen
shows he did was
thing he
the...
did.
Sorry, Josh?
I saw the acoustic. There's wee acoustic clips of him just sitting in a round playing a guitar.
That's right.
Ah, it's fantastic. It's really good.
Well, he played his last shows somewhere in America a week before he passed. But I didn't realise he actually played 2 shows on the one night.
Oh,
So he did a 7 o'clock show for 2.5 hours, and then he did a 10:30 show for another 2.5 hours or something. So different set lists on them and all that. So the guy had a bit of chops about him. 71% Twitter, in case I don't shout that one out. So that means 29% are idiots, George, I think. Is that
fucking idiots.
fucking idiots, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Except for Chris Thompson, he's definitely not an
Well,
idiot.
he's barred now, isn't he? We'll
No,
get him
Chris
on again.
gets special dispensation.
Of course he does. We love Chris. Okay, so that was Prince. Number 44 was Nas with Illmatic. So give me 1 second, guys. Okay, 44, Nas Illmatic. So, Rolling Stone, other rappers were harder and brasher, but nobody captured the creeping menace of life on the streets like this 20-year-old from New York's Queensbridge projects. With lines like, quote, I never sleep because sleep is the cousin of death, Nas showed more poetic style than any MC since Rakim. His debut begins with the sound of a subway train, and for the next 39 minutes he seems to visit every street corner from Queens to Brooklyn, detailing drug deals, escapism, persecution, prison life and survival. Throughout, he displays a pure focus and explosive dexterity. It's one thing to say, I dropped the ancient manifested hip-hop as he does in his first verse of Memory Lane. It's another to back that up with a stunning acrobatic second verse. Illmatic was an instant classic that never crossed over, which only deepened its myth with hip-hop heads. So that's Nas Illmatic. It was released on the 19th of April, 94, and it was his debut album. Who wants to lead us off on Nas?
I'll go with it.
Go on then.
Yeah, I didn't know the album, and I don't know much about Nas, to be honest with you, before I started listening to it, but it came across as like sort of hardcore NWA, like a sort of 90s version of The Last Poets, you know, dissonant dystopia kind of thing, but, you know, coming up to the end of the 20th century, it was, the rhymes were very tight, you know. I can't say I'm a huge hip-hop fan, but I did like the rhymes, and I did like the you know, the dip into a kind of New York that I don't know, because the New York that I know is pretty much Manhattan and, you know, upstate. But this was something very different, like a sort of urban seasoning hell. It's like, I like the economy of the earlier songs in the album, particularly New York State of Mind. It's not overladen with samples like a lot of hip hop is. And the samples he chooses tend to be, you know, like classic jazz ones like Donald Byrd and Reuben Wilson. There's also Gap Band in there as well. And his own dad, Ola Dar, who's quite a well-respected musician. It makes quite a positive contribution to the overall piece, and it gives the piece a chance to breathe. From what I've read, his subsequent output has been a lot more commercially successful, but nothing has come close critically to Illmatic. And I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I was going to enjoy it. I thought, you know, with a lot of albums of that kind of ilk, that I would be, you know, it just doesn't, you know, resonate with me. But the space between the rhymes, and it wasn't overlaid with samples, sort of worked for me. So yeah, I can get why it would work and would be very popular.
And does it sound different. So can you imagine why it had the impact it had? Whether you think it's great or not. But I really liked it, right? But I was struggling a bit to see why it was so different to other really good hip hop and rap records from sort of about that time.
Probably
Maybe it's just my
because
ear. Maybe I don't know. I was just couldn't quite.
this is an era where death row was all happening, and you had the East Coast versus West Coast thing, and the urban experience of people like Nas resonated with a lot of people, in similar projects in America and obviously in the States and the UK. And I can get why people got it, even if the examples that he's sharing weren't, something that I would have went through living on, an estate or living, in a 15-story tower block somewhere. But
I think he was 20, wasn't he, when it came out? I think he wrote it when he was like 18, 19. I think he had a fairly hard upbringing, which I guess a lot of these guys did.
Yeah.
So it sounds like that classic debut album where it all goes into that first record. It's got everything.
I can't say I'll go back to it, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But I didn't dislike it. I didn't. When I was listening to it, I was like, it's like when you listen to these albums that you're not overly familiar with. You're like, right, okay, skip, next. But I didn't feel that with this one. I listened to the whole album, and it was only about 11 songs long.
40 minutes.
40 minutes. Yeah, it was like, unlike a lot of the other hip hop albums and that we've listened to up to this point, it was in and out pretty quickly, and that appealed more to me than giving it 65, 70 minutes of extended jams and rhymes.
Yeah.
The Last Poets kind of thing, it did feel very much, and I like The Last Poets, it did feel like an extension of what they were doing. Maybe not as political, it was a bit more personal, but it had a similar kind of vibe to Last Poets. So yeah, I guess it got a thumbs up for me, that one.
Okay, cool. Dickson, Illmatic, Nas.
Yeah, I struggle with hip hop, I'm afraid. I find it exhausting to listen to. Generally, it's just a taste thing, I suppose, more than anything else. And this might seem a bit cruel, but if you've seen the film Planes, Trains and Automobiles, the bit where he's on the plane with Steve Martin's character's on the plane, and the John Candy character, Dale Griffith, just keeps talking, just over and over, and the Steve Martin character, Neil, I think his name is, he's just trying to get some peace and, relax into the flight. And Dale just keeps on talking. And that's how I feel about a lot of rap and hip hop. It's like, I can't process it. It's too fast. There's too many words, and they're coming at me relentlessly without any gaps. And I think, George touched on some stuff about samples and some of the grooves and that. And there's some nice stuff there. There's some nice bits of trumpet and such like, some nice beats and bass lines. But to me, they just get like overwhelmed. They get lost by this relentless rhetoric from the lead vocalist, which of course will be Nas.
So what about Dickson? If that was, say, what if we were reviewing a Fall album, where you've got the lead singer doing a lot of lyrics, some of them which are fantastic, but they're quite full on, aren't they? There's a lot of that stuff that's quite kind of in your face, and there's a wall of noise behind it and stuff. So, it's like, it's not a dissimilar idea, albeit the type of music's obviously different. So do you think, is it just this style of music that's kind of putting you off, or do you not think it's as good as other types of music? Or?
I guess it's just a taste thing. As I said, I just find it difficult to listen to, and that applies to like quite a lot of hip hop. There's the occasional thing here and there that I don't mind, but it's just not a genre that I've taken to, and I have tried, because obviously it's very popular, and these artists are writing about their lives, and you know, some of the themes can be quite juicy and interesting and enlightening. You know, getting an insight into lives that people live in different countries. But it's just that non-stop. It kind of reminds me of seagulls. You know, when seagulls they just don't shut up, and it's like, when is this going to end? And for me, it ended
I've got Steve
38 minutes
Martin
later.
I've got Steve Martin and I've got seagulls now. Is that right?
Yes,
John
sorry,
Candy.
maybe a few unusual analogies there.
Yeah, absolutely. Poor Naz.
But poor Naz, yeah. So
Yeah.
sorry, Naz, if you're listening, but it really wasn't my bag. And I found like some of the lyrics and that, maybe it makes me sound like I'm being a bit sensitive here, but it seemed quite cliched with, you know, drug references, gang references. Life's a bitch and then you die. That's why we get high. The bits of misogyny in there, and the N word seemed to be dropped more so in the first kind of third of the album. For whatever reason, you know, I did only listen to it once. It seemed to become less as the album went on. But there, unfortunately, there wasn't an awful lot for me to hinge on to say that I liked. I think
Okay.
there has to be more gaps between the lyrics to let the music breathe. If I was just to listen to the music itself, I think I would probably like quite a lot of it. But it's just that relentless vocal, and you know, probably for good reason. He just seems angry, and when I listen to music, I don't really want to feel angry for 40 minutes. I don't mind it if you get the occasional song that fires you up a little bit, but it just felt like a full album of anger, with very little breath in between.
So he was rejected by Def Jam initially, who obviously had became a bit of a sort of touchstone for stuff. So I Brian John in here, but you know, there probably was a fair bit of anger in his life, if that makes sense. Partly his upbringing,
Sure, yeah,
and then partly, you know,
that, yeah.
making records, getting knocked back, all the things that people go through, I'm sure. So you can maybe understand the backstory, but you know, that doesn't necessarily help you like the record any more or less.
Yeah.
So, John, we've obviously chatted quite a lot about hip hop and rap, and you know, I think we've struggled, but we've managed to come through that and, you know, find good things and vote some of them in as well, to be fair. So what?
Oh yeah, we have.
Go on then.
I mean, he's 2021 when this comes out, and you're right. You know, he's probably writing about this when he's 17, 18, 19-year-old, and it's about his life. That's basically what he's writing about. He's writing about his experiences. You know, and his experiences are about gangs, they're about drugs, they're about poverty, they're about the police, they're about street life, they're about all these things. So it is authentic. And I think one of the guys that when he started off in music, there was I think, can you hear me?
Yeah.
You can. I don't know what happened there. One of the guys that helped him, I think, was a neighbour, and you know, a couple of years before it, his neighbour got shot dead.
Mm-hmm.
It's just his pal, you know. So this is about his life. So I get the anger. I totally get what he's singing about. I think, and you know, his rapping style is quite full on, all that sort of stuff. But I think it actually suits music. I think that actually, if you separate the two between the rapping and the backing music, I think you'll actually find some good nuanced music, particularly on the opening track, New York State of Mind. I think, you know, it's piano heavy. It's actually cracking music. So, and that can be difficult to separate because quite often all you're hearing is, you know, the quickness of the rap and all that sort of stuff.
That's what I find difficult, yeah.
Yeah. I think the other song, Life's a Bitch, again, just listen to the backing music. And I think that's the song his dad plays on. His dad plays the cornet. His dad was, I believe, a jazz musician. Mm-hmm. So he has taken other influences as part of this, but predominantly it is a very hip hop, in your face record. George mentioned, you know, it's not overdone with samples. I agree with that. I think, but you do get it on, I think, The World Is Yours. There's quite a lot of scratching, quite a lot of samples, but that's not symptomatic of what else goes on. What's the other one? Half Time.
Yep.
That's an absolute belter of a song. That's got the Average White Band sampled on it, for example.
Nice.
So
That was
she's got
his
some
kind of,
good.
that was a single, really. That was a sort of breakthrough, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So she's got some good taste there. I think it's a decent album. Is it better than some of the ones we have voted on in this top 100? I would say it probably is in that genre.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would agree. I honestly would agree with that. It's of all the hip hop albums I've heard so far, the male hip hop artists, this is probably the best so far.
Mhm.
Well, I know it's a slightly different genre, but I didn't ask you about your veto, George, at the start because you missed the last recording because we voted
Yeah.
on Jay-Z.
On Jay-Z. Jay-Z can fucking do one.
Jay-Z is on the list at the moment. But again, we had a whole debate about that, right?
Did he make it? The album make it?
It did, yes.
Seriously?
Yes.
Shit.
So
Okay.
you have a veto, of
Well,
course. Everybody's got
I
one
don't
veto.
know. I might have to save that one.
Yeah,
But
okay.
I may bring it in for Jay-Z.
So I think it might have been a casting vote or something, but I think we kicked it about a lot. And the one thing we said about Jay-Z was that he kind of, inverted commas, got better. So this Blueprint was like 3 or 4 albums down for him, and he'd managed to do other stuff and whatever. So it was interesting where this one's the first one, and although he sold more records later on, you know, his critical recognition was never higher than it was with this one. And
Okay.
he got all sorts of awards and stuff like that. I know that the Source magazine, it was the first time they'd ever given the 5 mic rating to a debut album ever, which is the kind of black hip hop R&B type Rolling Stone magazine in America. So it, you know, whatever it was doing, it landed big in that audience, which, you know, tends to suggest there was something going on in it. I struggled. I was a bit like Dickson. I struggled a little bit to find enough nuance in it to enjoy it. You know, talks about the Prince album, which I loved, but part of the thing I love about that is that kind of light and shade and all the other styles and all the bits that are in there. It's full on, isn't it? This one, it's almost like one song, not one song, but one kind of one feel to it. I think the album, and it just batters through. The great thing is that it's finished. That you listen and it's done. And you think, oh, well, actually, that was okay. I did struggle a little bit with it to love it, you know, as much as I would like to. So he ended up in a big dispute, didn't he, with Jay-Z. So the two of them fell out for years and did all this, you know, when they do these spats on lyrics and stuff like that. But he ended up signing for his label. So money talks.
I hate all this hip hop feuds. Every single hip hop album, you read about the band or the artist, and they've got a feud. It's a lot of pish. It's basically the musical equivalent of WWF wrestling. That's what it is. It's bullshit.
Listen, John, wait a minute. All you need to do is think about, you just have to go to one city 200 miles south of where we are, Manchester, and every single singer from a Manchester band is in a feud with somebody else, or is even this, you know, has a messiah complex and fucking hates everybody else. Every one of them. Morrissey, Ian Brown, Noel Gallagher, you know, McCulloch, they're all that area. They're all fucking headcases.
Sean Ryder loves everybody, surely.
Sean's all right. Sean gets away with it, but everybody else is, and Tim Burgess is good as well, but everybody else is, they're all fucking maniacs.
Yeah, you forgot about Richard Ashcroft.
Richard Ashcroft, there you go.
Yeah. But is that not because...
And I'm sure Marquis Smith's probably still for the grave having a pop at folk as well.
Yeah. So there's something, you know, there's a lot of music is confrontational because it's very personal, and people do, you know, start believing their own publicity. And
yeah, I agree with all that. And I think if all those guys you called out there, George, I think we know them all pretty well. And their music, and you know, we can then filter that out a little bit, what we like and don't like. Whereas with this, I think
we don't really have it. We don't have the same context.
We struggle unless it's a big record that, you know, we were all into, or it was like a massive hit at the time. it has been quite hard for us, I think, to get into this. But in our defence, we have managed to vote a few in, and surprisingly, I think, put some in that maybe at the beginning we wouldn't have thought we would have done. So, so yeah, fair play to us for that. I guess we'll have a vote on it. He ended up, I think he's still going now, but he had this kind of first album thing, then he had a bit of a kind of lull, but he actually came back. He became, like, you know, really critically renowned again. And I was just going to touch on a point you made, Dickson, was that you're right about that sort of nigger reference and stuff, but of course he argued it was a cultural thing where he was trying to get the whole race thing back on the, you know, the front page, if you want,
Agenda,
and create the debate again, rightly or wrongly. But he actually ended up wanting to release an album called Nigger, which I think was in 2007, I think. And the record company just absolutely, like, balked at it and says it's a red line. In the end, the album came out untitled. So,
Well, in the same year, Pulp Fiction was released. A couple of months after this album was released, Pulp Fiction was released. And Samuel L. Jackson, Tarantino, obviously his words, they brought the N-word to a whole new level. And the use of that language, the use of, you know, those terms was brought, you know, right into the public eye. So maybe that albums like this set the path for, you know, storytellers like Tarantino, who then, you know, took it.
It just seems, yeah, I hear what you're saying, George, but it seems kind of like it was mainly Jules in Pulp Fiction, not exclusively, but mainly, and it seemed quite cartoony in Pulp Fiction, whereas in the Nas album, it just felt deadly serious, you know, which is probably his intention. And I don't know, I just found that a bit uncomfortable.
He must have been doing something right before we vote on it, because Fox News ended up getting 625,000 complaints about him being on the one of the shows at the time.
So if Fox News don't like him, then he gets a big thumbs up.
Yeah, it would sway my it would sway my vote for sure. Flip side of that is his promoter ended up in an Angolan jail because he agreed to play a gig over in Angola for some reason, and the guy gave him 300 grand up front, and then he said, "I have changed my mind." But so he never flew over, but at the time the promoter was there, obviously promoting the gig as you would. So they stuck him in jail for 30 days or something till they paid the money back, which he did. But cool. Okay, so I don't have to go back through the votes from the guys because they were all.
I'll just give you another wee snippet.
Go on, John.
His brother was in a band called the Bravehearts.
Was he?
Really?
Was that sort
there you
of
go,
bagpipe pop? What is that?
Bagpipe pop. Yeah, I don't know. And he's an Everton supporter as well.
Yeah. Well, don't tell Mac that from Bunnyman. He'll be picking him up again. Twitter obviously weren't fans. 89% was against this one. And all the guys that aren't all on tonight, they all voted no. So it's the only one where we had a no from everyone that wasn't on tonight.
Well, I wonder how many of them listened to it. That's the thing.
That's a good point. Graham Skinner was honest enough to say I don't think he'd even heard of him, never mind had listened properly to the record. But Graham said that in itself was probably a sign for him because he actually knew and or liked all the other records. So, you know, he was saying, look, if it had been that good at some point, the crossover would have came into his world and he'd have listened to it and took a view and whatever. And he just didn't know him at all. So, which is interesting. Okay, Dickson, what are we saying, mate?
It's a no from me.
Dixon's a no. George?
I'm going to say yes. It was a lot more sonically pleasing than I was expecting it to be. It had enough dissonance for me to enjoy it. It wasn't as sample heavy as I'd hoped, as I thought it would be. So yeah, I can get why this would be in the top 100.
Okay, cool, mate. And John?
It's been quite a difficult one for me to decide, and I've changed my mind a couple of times, but I am going to vote it in on the basis that we've voted in albums so far that are inferior to this. So I think I'd be doing it a disservice if I voted it out, given what's gone before. So I'm going to say yes.
Okay, give us one album that we've voted in that's inferior to this one.
Jay-Z.
Oh, I knew you'd say that. Okay, I'm going to vote. I'm going to vote it a no, but I equally would have voted that yes if it had looked as if we were going to vote it through. It definitely has importance, for sure. It just didn't feel as if it had as much importance and relevance as some of the other American ones that we've reviewed. But I do appreciate how hard it's been for us to get through these. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 no's and 2 yeses. So Naz is out, I'm afraid, guys, for the moment. So 43 is A Tribe Called Quest, The Low End Theory. Right. So, quote, we wanted the longevity of Earth, Wind and Fire and Prince and people of that nature. Fife Dog told Rolling Stone. We wanted to be known for full-length albums. Other people connected the dots between hip-hop and jazz, but A Tribe Called Quest's second album drew the entire picture. The sound is dominated by the low end of the title. They even recruited legendary jazz bassist Ron Carter, who had worked with Thelonious Monk and Miles Davis. As Carter gets dope on the double bass, the tribe discourse on matters ranging from the music industry to sexual politics. Each time Q-Tip rhymes over Carter's bass lines, the groove just gets deeper. So that is A Tribe Called Quest. It was released on September 91, and that's their second studio album. So, John, what's your take on A Tribe Called Quest?
I've always loved Q-Tip's vocal. I think he's just got a great voice. It's just really, really good. I think, again, I like this, and I think it's completely different from a lot of the hip-hop albums we've seen. It's more laid back, more jazz influenced. So it's not got that.
Because we're big on jazz, aren't we? We're big on jazz, right?
No, we're not. Well, I'm not.
Right.
But I get the fusion here, and it, if you think about what the album just talked about, I think that more in your face. This is not like that. And again, there's a Scottish connection with Fife Dog, although I think they did miss a trick there, and they should have called themselves Fife Doug. I think that would have been far better, in my opinion. But
his nickname was the 5 Foot Assassin, apparently.
That's right. Yeah.
Fife Doug. Yeah.
So I think it's a really, really decent album. I like Bugging Out. It's got a great double bass in it. So anything with a double bass, I'll always have a wee ear out for. I think it's a real alternative to what was going on. We talked about the East Coast, West Coast thing, that sort of gangster rap. This is the polar opposite from that. So I do like it. I think the one thing it's missing for me, and it's I think it's a good question worth a debate. There's not a standout track in it, right? So if you look at the first album, the songs like I Left My Wallet and El Segundo, instantly memorable. Benita Applebum, Can I Kick It? Their songs, as soon as you hear them, you get that right away. There's not a song like that in this album, but it is a really solid, consistent album all the way through. So does an album actually need a standout song?
So does an album need a standout song then?
Yes, I don't know. And that's kind of what I've been grappling with. I think, it's good, potentially a great album, but is it a great album? Because it's just not got, one of those types of songs that are just going to raise the bar a little bit. But I mean, as I say, I liked it. There's a lot of really, really good tracks in it, but not one standout.
Is there a counter argument that might be because of the quality of all the songs? Some albums have got, very high standards throughout, which then doesn't have as many standout tracks in them, maybe?
But maybe. But you generally get a song that's like, right, that's the one. That's the song that, what at least one song you would expect to, define an album that people say, that's the one. But I don't get that in here.
Right, okay. Cool, we'll come back to that, I'm sure. Dickson, we're in a sort of similar ballpark here, but not the same, I don't think, as Naz.
Yeah.
So a bit more musical, this one?
Yeah, a bit more musical, and I agree. pretty much entirely with what John has said. It's likable. It's nice on the ears. Double bass, as he mentioned. You know, it's always nice to hear a double bass. You can almost hear the fingers on the strings. It just gives it a different feel and authenticity. Even if it's sampled, I don't know if it is or not, but it just, you know, it just gives a different feel. And
I don't think it is. I
standouts.
think well, maybe
Is
there
it
are some
genuine,
samples,
yeah?
but there is a double bass on.
Genuine, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I get.
Yep.
I because of the lack of standout song and also the lack of hooky chorus, it seemed quite similar tempo, kind of one note. That's maybe not the best expression throughout, and it was all nice enough to listen to. It was interesting, and I thought that the beds and the music were what kept me listening to it. But there was no massive hook and there was no standout song, and that did make it not that memorable, unfortunately, which is a shame because there's plenty to like. John also mentioned, you know, the tone of the vocals, and I do quite like jazz. Not the jazz where everybody sounds like they're competing with each other, but you know, laid back jazz, and you could hear some of that coming through. I didn't find it cringy to listen to or anything, and I could hear what the vocalists were saying. You know, I could hear what was being communicated, and that wasn't always the case with the Nas album for me.
It doesn't feel as urban. I don't know if that's the right word, but it feels a bit more universal. The sound.
Yeah, more universal.
Yeah,
a bit more laid back. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
okay,
it's pretty much just echoing what John said, really.
Yeah, it was recorded apparently on the console that John Lennon used for, I think it was Double Fantasy or Rock and Roll. I can't remember. So that was one of the things we were pretty keen on. And they had this sort of fairly big launching point with their first record because they did come from nowhere a little bit and their sound was different. And then you'd kind of kick it and all that stuff. So this second album had quite a lot sort of riding on it and it was very well received. In fact, I found an NME review, which I thought was quite interesting, that said it's not just rap, it's near perfection. So it wasn't just getting reviewed in America and saying, you know, this is really good. It seemed to cross over into other markets that maybe wouldn't normally to be doing that with, which I thought.
I assume they did that kind of thing intentionally. You know, the previous material there was standout songs, hooky choruses. This time they maybe didn't bother with that purposely to see if that would communicate. You know, if that would resonate with their fan base. Okay. So fair play to them for not just doing the same thing again.
Good man. Thanks for that, George.
I didn't enjoy this one as much as I'd hoped I would. Again, what John and Dickson were talking about, didn't have that. There was nothing to hang my hat on to start with, whereas, you know, when Nas is Illmatic, you had at least New York State of Mind to say, right, that's the one that if I'm going back to something, that's what I'm going back to. I didn't get that feeling with this. It was a lot more like the sort of Days Age, you know, De La Soul type stuff. I liked its mellowness, but there was nothing overly memorable about it. You know, like John mentioned before, Can You Kick It? You know, that was like ubiquitous back in the day. There was nothing on this album that was of a similar ilk. I did like Ron Carter. You know, Ron Carter's like Grammy winning. He won a Grammy, I think, for his double bass. One of the pieces he gave to the movie Around Midnight, which is one of my favourite films ever. So he's a great addition to the first 11 of A Tribe Called Quest, but they sort of lost my way goals here. It didn't really resonate with me. Again, the hip hop thing, not one of the genres that I would normally go to. The jazz would have pulled me in, but there was not enough. There was not enough song in there for me to make it an enjoyable experience. So I have to say no.
It's quite interesting, this one, because, you know, we talk about sort of legacy and stuff when we're reviewing these albums, because I think one of the ideas is whether we like it or don't like it, the legacy of it should be, it's quite important in its own way, or it shouldn't be on the list, right? But this one's quite interesting. So when you looked at people who sort of name check it, it wasn't just in that American rap hip hop world. You know, you were getting across, so for example, Jack White, huge fan of Tribe Called Quest, which is fine. I mean, you know, he's obviously American, and I'm sure he was into it. But there was guys like that. Elton John's raving about them. Said the seminal hip hop band of all time.
Elton does that though.
He does.
Whoever's the new big thing, Elton. Yeah, fucking love this. By the way, I love it. He does it a lot.
Yeah, he does. I'll give you that one.
You know,
it's not. It can't all be George Michael. But he also, All Music said it's the most consistent and flowing hip hop album ever recorded. And that was a retrospective review. So sometimes after 10, 15, 20 years, they go back and re-review these things. And All Music's fairly distorted. You know, it's not cutting edge per se. So there's obviously something in it that seems to have given it longevity with a whole cross section of the market and the sort of popular press and what have you. So
I think that's the case with a lot of these albums, though. That, you know, they don't particularly sell well at the time, but they do have a legacy, and they're picked up by other artists or the influence.
That's interesting, John. It was 154. So the first time Rolling Stone put this list together, which was 20 odd years ago, it was 154, and obviously it's 43 now. So it looks as if it's one of these ones that, as it's matured, it appears to have gathered more respect. And
but as we know, the Rolling Stone aren't always right, and we are.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more, mate. And it wasn't particularly well selling. 45 top on Billboard. It went platinum eventually, but you know, took a few years to do that.
I'm just trying to work out what it was that made it, that separates this from a whole bunch of other albums that, you know, didn't get mentioned or were mentioned earlier. What makes this number 43? And I couldn't work it out. I couldn't work out why that would be higher than, you know, Prince's Sign of the Times. It seems very arbitrary. I don't. It's one of the things about this list that sort of fucking winds me up. You know, Hunky Dory's what, 20 or 30.
It was number 80 odd, wasn't it? That's right. Yeah,
nonsense.
We were a bit miffed about that.
Nonsense. But the Nas album for me resonated far more than this one. And this is higher up the pecking order.
So in its defence, and John quite rightly says we then reserve the right to vote things in and out. That's why we're doing it. But if you remember when we started this, we did say the Rolling Stone review list was going to be more challenging for us, rather than doing it NME or whatever, you know. So that's definitely been the case. But there was 300 contributors to the original list. So again, whatever you think of them all, but you know, it's 300 of a cross section of the good, the bad, and the ugly from somewhere in the music industry. So you're right, George. I don't know why they would have put this at 40 odd and Hunky Dory 80, but they did. So you know, it's interesting that you can't undo that. I guess that's why they do it every 5-10 years or whatever to see how things have changed over the course of that time. But okay, so the guys were let me see now. We had Graham was a yes, David was a no, Chris was a no, Stephen was a yes, and Lisa was undecided, which I guess probably means a no, I guess, but she was undecided anyway. She couldn't call either way. So what's that? 2 yeses and 2 no's if we leave Lisa's off for the moment. So Dickson, I'll go to you first, mate. What are you thinking?
I think George said it for me. There's not enough song, so I'll go for a no.
It's a no. George?
No.
No, thanks, mate. John?
A heavy heart, I will say no on the basis there is not one standout track.
Okay, well, I was probably a yes on this one, but sort of the flip side of the Nas one, it wouldn't have taken me much to put it either way. So that's 1, 2, 3 yeses, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 no's. So leaving Lisa's out, so it's a no for that one, which is fine. I did see, talk about Can I Kick It? I did see something on YouTube, which was, I think it was from the time when it came out, and it was from the Showtime Apollo in Harlem, I think. And the crowd are just, I mean, it is from another time, right? But it's fantastic. All these kids all going mental and stuff like that. So definitely worth checking that out. Okay, so that was Tribe Called Quest. They are out for the moment. 42 is Radiohead, OK Computer. Okay, so Radiohead recorded their third album in the mansion of actress Jane Seymour while she was filming Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman. OK is where the band began pulling at its sound like putty, seeing what happened, not worrying if it was still, quote, rock. What resulted is a slow, haunting album with unforgettable tracks such as Karma Police. Guitarist Johnny Greenwood said, I got very excited at the prospect of doing string parts that didn't sound like Eleanor Rigby, which is what all string parts had sounded like for the past 30 years. We use violins to make frightening white noise stuff like the last chord of Climbing Up the Walls. So that was the quote from Rolling Stone. It was released in May 1997. It was the third studio album, I think, as I mentioned there. Dickson, OK Computer, tell us about it, mate.
Yeah, I just like the fact that it wasn't what I expected. I don't mean I've just listened to it for the first time recently, but we had Pablo Honey and then the Bends, and then they hit us with OK Computer, and I think it's an excellent record. They open our Airbag. When I heard it for the first time, I thought it's weird that it can be uncomfortable and groovy at the same time. And I thought that's a great opener. And lyrically, it's always quite intriguing what Tom York comes out with. Might not make an awful lot of sense. You might not even be able to hear what he's saying half the time. But there's always something quite poetic and interesting and intriguing in there. Paranoid Android, when I heard that, I thought any other band that had like lots of different ideas, at different tempos, different top lines, maybe in a vault or whatever that they for working on a new album, a lot of bands would probably just do away with them or bin them or think that was a good idea, but maybe come back to it down the line. But what they did was they spliced all these things together to try and create something entirely different. And somehow it worked. And then they had the audacity to release it as a single at 6 minutes and 23 seconds. And it did really well. And that alone, I just think that's great. But it's also a song that I never tire of, never ever tire of listening to Paranoid Android. I think things like Exit Music, which you think should be last. So I mentioned during the Sign of the Times chat that there was no real memorable endings to the songs, whereas Exit Music for a Film and Paranoid Android, if you take even just those two, they have memorable endings. And even the closing track, The Tourist, ends with a triangle, which probably one of the first instruments Johnny Greenwood picked up as a kid. I just like there's a single triangle note to finish the whole thing.
Had you came to this, you talked about Pablo Honey, Benz, and then this. So at the time, so from Benz to this, were you thinking, what, that's a pretty good band, interested to see what they bring out, or were they just another part of kind of marginal Britpop at the time, or what was your take on them?
I was a big fan. I went to see them
right.
during the Benz tour. They played the Barrowlands, 1995. I think I was only about 15 or 16 or something.
Which I imagine had been good. It's quite a kind of rocky record, isn't it?
They were outstanding. They played every song off the Benz and about 4 or 5 or so off of Pablo Honey. And they played Lucky as well. So Lucky, that was on the Help album, the War Child album. And there's also an OK Computer, so got to hear that live. And I suppose I saw Pablo Honey was okay. There's a couple of really good songs. There's a few fillers, good closing song. And then the Benz was just entirely different and amazing. And I thought, what on earth are they going to do next? I expected the third album to be shite, to be honest. And then they come out with OK Computer. I was just like, what? It blew me away.
So they've got this one. They've got this one in the 100, and they've got I don't have another one. Sorry, they have it. So my apologies. They do have another one coming up in the 100 at the moment, but not maybe the one that people might imagine it is. Which, back to the chat about the list and the vote and stuff, guys. It's it does curveball a few times, which I guess is quite interesting. So you've come into it, you're a fan. Radiohead start to curveball stuff, and this is the record really that changes that for everyone, I guess, including them.
Well, arguably, but some people might say it's Kid A because Kid A is like so wildly different to OK Computer.
Mhm.
And then, Hail to the Thief is they just seem to do something different every time and get away with it. And if you think about a band like Oasis, like they did something as their second album as a follow-up was kind of like, yeah, it was a progression, but it was much of the same sort of thing. And then they ran out of ideas and fell on their arse. Whereas, Radiohead just seemed to manage to recreate themselves, reinvent themselves. It sounds cliched to say that. And I thought that this was like a marker to say, yeah, you can expect different things from every album we release. And to be fair, they've stuck to that. But we note
Do you
here
think
that
that's because sorry, Dixon, do you think that's because, unlike Oasis, they have a number of different members of the band that are contributing something specifically, as opposed to Oasis, who turn up to Noel Gallagher and say, "What have you got now?"
aye.
Radiohead seem to have a collective, and they're all bringing something to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that does certainly contribute. It's not this album. I'd heard when they were doing Kid A, one of the things that they did as part of the creative process, turned up at the studio, and they faced the corners. Okay, there's 5 of them. So apart from the drummer, the other 4 folk faced the corners of the studio, and somebody just started playing a lick, and the others just joined in. No eye contact, nothing. Purely going with what they heard. And so I don't think that would work with the likes of a band like Oasis. So yeah, I dare say there is something in that.
They didn't spend a lot of time slagging all the other bands either, which Oasis and guys we touched on earlier on there, I think they're from some Oxford, aren't they? So they were kind of quite insular, for want a better word. They just seemed to just like playing the music, didn't they? And that was unusual as well at the time. Everyone was getting sort of big personalities, and social media was starting to become a thing, and they weren't part of that at all, really.
No, they barely say anything. If I've seen them live a couple of times, and it's usually after about the 3rd or 4th song before Tom York says hello. So they're just all about the music. How do we note there about climbing up the walls? That it actually sounds like they were climbing up the walls while they were recording it. It's really quite an uncomfortable song, that, but in a good way. It's just, I think it's a great album.
Great album. Good man. Thanks for that, George.
Sonically far more daring than their previous output, Pablo Honey and the Bends. I loved it. It was such a breath of fresh air. Just coming at the end of the Britpop kind of year, and I was not a big fan of the Britpop music. I hated all the I was really off pop music at this point. But they came along and came in at the charts with things like Paranoid Android and Karma Police, and it was like, fuck, I've been waiting for this for a long time. There's Paranoid Android, for instance, its tempo changes, and the lyrics are so powerful. The Airbag, the opener, is it's very influenced by J.G. Ballard, and I'm a big Ballard fan. I'm like, yes, fucking, I get this. This is Crash, man. This is just what I want to hear. There were a lot of lazy claims that they were the sort of Floyd of Britpop, and I really fucking didn't like that. It probably came because of tunes like Fit and Happier. The talking sections sound very much like Dark Side of the Moon. That's probably the only Floyd thing you can level at them that may be seen as a bit prog, but I didn't feel that at all. I felt they were, mapping their own course, totally unique sound.
Was it not about, I do agree with you, but was it not about the idea of the thing having this theme, kind of invisible theme about consumerism, people, the change in society? So Pink Floyd had done that. We did Dark Side of the Moon 1 or 2 episodes ago, and there was a kind of a bit of a recurrence to the theme of this, not necessarily the music, maybe.
No, this felt a lot more dystopian than Floyd. Floyd's concepts were pretty straight and linear. This felt a lot more jagged, and I felt that they were, they sort of foresaw what was coming in the next 25 years, whereas I didn't get that with Floyd. Floyd was very much this is our concept of lifetime and death. This didn't. This felt very much like we've had a glimpse into what's coming next, and fucking buckle up, guys. I really liked it. Listened to it again today. I've not listened to it in I don't know many years, but it stands up so well. It's the influences from Douglas Adams to Miles Davis. It's all there. It's a genius album, and by some distance, I think their best album.
That's the album title, is that right? The Douglas Adams.
Yeah, OK Computer. Yes, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's interesting that a lot of folk have got smart speakers and they say OK Google these days. You know, OK Computer. It's a computer of sorts. You know.
I think they were way ahead of their time here. They saw, this came out the same year that Labour came to power, and they sort of saw through all that, the artifice of it, and were quite happy to comment on it. No, it's a much more important album than even I gave it credit for at the time.
And doubling back on what Dickson said there was that not only that, but it was commercially very successful, which it's actually quite difficult to square those things off looking back when you actually sit and listen to it. It's there's not an awful lot.
If you're listening to the charts and you're hearing Shania Twanya and fucking the Corrs and another Oasis,
Blur,
and then you hear, but Blur was good. But then you hear some songs like Paranoid Android and Camera Police in the charts. I was like, there's hope. There is. So for chart bods like myself, it gave me a wee bit of, oh great, the British public aren't fucking idiots.
Well, they probably are most of the time. So Paranoid Android was top 3 single, which beggars belief. I can't remember who played it. It was usually Joe Elliott, I think it was, but it was played in prime time BBC One at like 10:30 on a Tuesday. The first time I remember hearing it, I was like, what the fuck is it?
I missed that, and pop for me sort of died. Stock Aitken and Waterman sort of took a flamethrower to pop in the late 80s, and it with the relentless rise of brainless dance music, which I can't fucking bear. Doof George Bowie kind of stuff. I can't bear that. That kind of music put me off pop music. This kind of thing brought me back in.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And when you look at, we've had a look at kind of best of or critics lists and stuff like that. John, you're good at this as well, mate. So the NME's list that year, OK Computer was number 2 on their list of best albums. And generally speaking, the lists were pretty good, pretty on the money. 3 was Urban Hymns, The Verve.
You say that, yeah.
And 1, do you want to stab at 1 then, John? Since I took your 3 off you there.
No, I was going to go for number 3. So you crack on.
It was Ladies and Gentlemen, We Are Floating in Space by
Spiritualized.
Yeah. Which I thought was interesting. I know it's not the same as OK Computer, but again, you were stretching it to say it was a particularly commercial album. It just sounded amazing, right? So it was interesting that music did appear to be sort of changing at this point, and they were definitely at the front of that for sure. John, what's your take, mate?
Yeah, well, just before I go on, I'll just pick up on what George was saying there about Stock Aitken and Waterman. I just think after the Reynolds Girls, it was all downhill for them, wasn't it, for those guys? But anyway, just a small aside. So me and Radiohead go back quite a long way, actually. All the way back to Creep, which everybody knows. And I bought that CD single at the time. And then I went to see them. They were supporting James, would you believe, at the Barrowland, right? So, and this is before the first album came out. And I thought, I want to go see this band. I get in, and somebody flicked a cigarette, and it hit Tom York, boom, right there. So most of the crowd thought it was fucking hilarious, actually, but he didn't. and he threatened to storm off the stage and stuff like that. And he was getting a bit of the southern softy treatment for the Barland crowd, as you can imagine. You know, I think, just a support band, mate. Who are you? So that was my first introduction to Radiohead. And I think if you look at how they've grown as a band, I think bands like that have to go through that Pablo Honey stage, that the Bends. You know, they were a bit of a guitar band to start with. They couldn't have come out with this as a first album. It's just impossible. And you know, not exactly the same, but you look at the Arctic Monkeys in terms of how they've evolved as a band as well. And you could even chuck that at other bands and artists as well. Not suggesting for a minute like Bowie, but you know, they have to go through a bit of osmosis before they can come out with something like this. Back in '97, I did like my Britpop, right? I did buy this. I think I played it a couple of times and thought, what a lot of arty bollocks. Quite frankly, right?
Yeah. Too proggy, John, wasn't it?
Yeah. I just thought, oh, that's not for me. I can go and do one, right? So the CD gathered dust for a number of years. And I'm not a massive fan of Radiohead, but I do like some songs, such as No Surprises and Karma Police, are probably my favourite two tracks. But so I was going back to this, and I thought, I'm not really sure what I'm going to take in it. I absolutely loved it. And I've been listening to it, and I've been playing it a few times. And I think, you know, we talk about those songs and some of the other ones that are very well known, but I think there's so much more than album songs that Let Down, Electioneering. I think Electioneering is just brilliant. It's wild, it's chaotic. Lucky, I think Dickson mentioned that as well. Just an absolutely fantastic song. So, so I was genuinely and pleasantly surprised when I went back to it. I think it's got a lot of intricacies going on in it. I think, you know, it's very textured musically. I believe they recorded the majority of it live, which is slightly unusual, I guess, in this day and age. But and interestingly, another wee factoid: they got a plate reverberator, whatever the hell that is. I've absolutely no idea. But they bought it from Jonah Louie, and it's on this album. Right?
And what is it, guys? So I'll ask the musicians, what do you call it? A plate or a reverberator?
A plate reverberator.
It's just a real deep reverb sound, plate reverb. Right.
Okay.
So there you go.
Jonah Louie. Is that Stop the Calvary, Jonah Louie? That one?
That's the very one, yeah.
Does he play that on Stop the Calvary, or?
I don't know.
Listen now.
If we meet him at a party in the kitchen, we can ask him that, I guess, you know. So
on a week again, John.
Was pleasantly surprised. I was not expecting to like it as much as I did, given my perceived take when I had my younger head on. So, it's one that's definitely getting a big tick in my box, and it's an album I will be revisiting significantly.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that, and I did buy it at the time. Like you, John, I wasn't anti-Britpop. Pulp and stuff I loved, but I wasn't sort of crazy on the sort of bigger Britpop stuff. But I bought this and loved it, and then stopped loving it, and then ended up coming back to it again when they became more and more experimental, as Dickson touched on earlier on there. And still love it. I like George and yourself been playing it and thinking it's just so good. It also still sounds great. So I don't know how they recorded and produced it, what have you, but it just doesn't sound in the slightest state. In fact, if anything, it sounds cutting edge almost with some of the sounds and stuff that So whoever, you know, pats off to
Nigel
Godrich, absolutely, who became like a George Martin-y type guy, really connected to the band, didn't he? That was quite interesting. Do you know they road tested some of the songs for this, supporting Alanis Morissette in America?
Interesting.
So we voted in. I think we done Jagged Little Pill a while back, the sort of classic pop album thing. But you know, it's quite a brave thing to A, tour with her, and then B, knock out. Can you imagine them knocking out Paranoid Android and as a support band? As you say, Dickson, you're at the barrage, you know, having a bit of an attitude and stuff. So they've definitely always had that thing about them, and it's for sure stood the test of time on them. A couple of things just to finish, and we'll have a wee vote on it. as ever, you love bands and you hate bands. And I did see that BBC Six Music had done a poll on, I think it was the 20 most overrated albums of all time. And this was number 6 on the list. So it's not a smash hits poll. I mean, love or hate Six Music, but the idea is guys like
smash hits.
Oh, so did I. Sorry, I meant I'm not sure it's going to be Wham fans voting against OK Computer or what have you.
I'm a Wham fan.
I watched the documentary the other night there. Loved it.
Great, it really is good.
Absolutely loved it. So top 3 on the most overrated albums ever, where 3 was the Libertines album, the same name. 2 was Coldplay X and Y. And number 1 was Nevermind.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So just
overrated by people I've never listened to them, I bet you.
Well, we'll go on to Nevermind later on. That's a bit of a blind spot for me. But yeah, so one other thing to say on that one was, No Surprises was done in a single take, the whole song.
Amazing.
Yeah, it just shows how good they are, right? I think they were all facing each other at this point, Dickson, so maybe that helped to one take, mate, didn't it? Yeah.
No Surprises felt like it was a let's see if we can get the capo, like how high up the neck can we get the capo and make a good song.
Yeah,
I think that's probably how it started.
I've got to be honest, my intro to, I mean, I had heard Creep and stuff, but it wasn't really a hit initially, wasn't it? It got re-released and what have you. But when they did Lucky for the Help, the War Child album, and it was on that, and I thought the album was amazing, but I thought that song was just, it seemed to kind of epitomise the album more than a lot of the other guys who just kind of gave good songs and stuff to it. But there seemed to be almost a bespoke, write or whatever for it, which I thought was amazing. Cool. And just on Creep, if you haven't saw it, you must watch their version of it from the MTV Beach House in 1993.
Right.
It's really available on YouTube. It's one of the best performances you'll ever see.
Oh, yeah, I think I've seen that.
They're all sitting around, it's like a pool party.
Yeah, I think I've seen that.
MTV, mid-90s, and Radiohead are playing Creep at the side of this pool live. I might add.
Yeah.
Oh, mammy, I mean, Tommy Horton never looks particularly happy, right? But you just got to watch this thing, right? It's fantastic. Absolutely, it's genius. Absolute genius, whoever came up with all that. Cool. So what we've got, this one again was quite easy for all the guys that aren't on. So Chris, David, Graham, Stephen and Lisa were all yeses for OK Computer. Have we got any dissenters for that?
No.
Are we all nodding?
Oh.
We don't get many clean sweeps, to be fair, George, but I think it sounds as if we're all sort of feeling a bit of love for that. And it sounds very well deserved. 53 minutes, so again, but the songs are so good, 12 songs and they're great. 79% was a yes on Twitter, which was cool as well. And of course, you talk about the famous Glastonbury set they did, where they thought they'd killed their career and all that kind of stuff. So there's a whole bunch of stuff behind them. So pretty interesting guys. We've got one more album to come from them. Are
you allowed to say what it is, Brian? It's just like OK Computer is like a big album for me, but it's actually not my favourite Radiohead album. So
it's Kid A.
Curious.
Yeah.
Oh, it's Kid A. Okay.
Yeah. I think it's top 20. I can't remember the number, but
right.
Still to come. Cool. So that takes us to the last one, and I think this is the first time. Is this the first Stones album we've had?
I think it is, yeah.
I think it is, mate, yeah. So George will take us away a second on this one. So 41 on the list, the Rolling Stones, Let It Bleed. So the record kicks off with a terrifying Gimme Shelter, the song that came to symbolise not only the catastrophe of the Stones' free show at Altamont, but also the death of the utopian spirit of the 60s. And the entire album burns with apocalyptic cohesion, the sex-mad desperation of Live With Me, the murderous blues of Midnight Rambler, Keith Richards' lethal biting guitar on Monkey Man, the epic moralism with honky-tonk piano and mass vocal chorus of You Can't Always Get What You Want, which Mick Jagger wrote on an acoustic guitar in his bedroom. Somebody said that we could get the London Bath Choir, Jagger recalled, and we said, yeah, get them, that will be a laugh. And they did. So that was Rolling Stones Let It Bleed, released 28th of November 69, and it was their 8th studio album in the UK at the time. George, last one tonight, mate. Tell us about it.
Dixon was talking about the outros and how disappointed he was that Prince's album didn't have any decent outros. Well, when it comes to intros, I don't think there's a band that's. I'm struggling to think of a band with better intros than the Rolling Stones, and they've got a number on this album.
Status Quo.
the Oasis of their day.
They've got great intros.
But it's the same intro, mate.
I give you that. Yeah.
But this album opens with "Gimme Shelter," and that's what it's one of those. For me anyway, as a big Stones fan, this is a goosebumps kind of moment when I hear that sort of apocalyptic kickstart. I know something. You feel as if something bad's going to happen, and it was recorded. During a period, of immense turmoil for the band. They started recording it late '68 and continued recording it right up until maybe about a month before they released it. So in between that, they had the death of Brian Jones. They sacked him first, and then he died a week or so later. They played Hyde Park, and then they played Altamont, which is probably one of the most notorious gigs in rock history. And there's so much of a portent of this album. There's real heaviness, a real heavy vibe about it. There's an apocryphal story about Mary Clayton, who sung the now legendary War Children. It's just a shot away on Gimme Shelter. They got her out of bed heavily pregnant to sing that line, to do a bit. And if you listen to it, there's clips of her singing it stripped back, and it's incredible. And I don't know if it's true or not that she lost the child soon afterwards as well. So it's just one of those albums that has incredible vibes. There's songs on it, from Robert Johnson, Dead at the Crossroads. There's Midnight Ramblers about the Boston Strangler. It's there's a lot of real dark undercurrent with this album, but as a piece of music, I think it's phenomenal. It's the second of the 4 absolute classic Stones albums produced by Jimmy Miller, and he also filled in for Charlie Watts on You Can't Always Get What You Want, because Charlie Watts, for some reason, just couldn't get the groove. So Jimmy Miller, the producer, filled in on the drums.
I don't know if you know this, George. Is that the only song that he doesn't play drums on that there's drums on, if that makes sense?
As far as I'm aware, it's the only track that he didn't feature on in their entire recorded canon. Wow. But there's a number of their regular trusted collaborators on it. Bobby Keys is on it, Ian Stewart obviously is on it, Nicky Hopkins is playing piano on it, and Ry Cooder plays guitar on the album, and he almost got the gig full time as their replacement for Brian Jones, but they eventually plumped for Mick Taylor, and that was a brilliant decision, because I think Mick Taylor's input to the Stones was it turned them from being a good band into being a sensational band. They seemingly wanted Escher to do the MC Escher, the artist, to do the cover, but they decided to go for a little known cookery writer called Delia Smith, and she designed the album cover. Remarkably, it's
iconic. It's iconic as well, right?
It's a Gatto blaster, mate, of an album cover. That's a John joke.
It's on all week as well, that one. Yeah.
Let's be having you.
Very good.
But it's not my favourite Stones album, but it's definitely worth an inclusion in the top 100 in my opinion. There's enough great tracks on this. There's maybe 3 or 4 absolute world-class tracks on this. Couple of not bad ones, but when the Stones were at their best, and they were from about 69 to 72, they were definitely the world's best rock and roll band.
So we'll come back to this as we go around the guys, but you're right. They're sort of famous for this run of records that they've done. But at the moment, there's only 2 on the list. So you argue there's 4 or 5 sort of classic Stones albums on that run, but there's only 2 at the moment sitting on the list. This one and one other. So it'll be interesting once we get through this vote. It'll be interesting to see what we do about that, if we do believe there's a sort of need to rebalance that at some point down the line.
I would say if you're talking about rock and roll, rock albums, the Stones would need at least 3 in the top 100, 3 maybe 4 in the top 100. Not that good.
Sure we can find a way to make that happen if that's what we all think. So and back to that, just to finish that, George, maybe a connection. We sort of dissed the Pink Floyd to OK Computer thing, but is there that kind of apocalyptic feel to some of this record, which was that, end of 60s question, kind of Cold Vietnam War, all that kind of stuff, yeah?
It definitely drew a line under the 60s. This is the end of the 60s, basically. The Beatles were, they recorded Get Back, Let It Be and Abbey Road in the same year. So in the same years, they could have been recorded at any other time. This is definitely a snapshot of 1969. There's shootings at, on campuses in America. Vietnam's happening. There's war. There's fucking revolution in Europe. This is a proper snapshot of 1968, 1969.
Okay, cool. John, what do you want to add to that, mate?
I love it. I mean, I think 2 things: the opening track and closing track can sometimes define an album, and the opening track and closing track in this are just absolutely fantastic. I agree with George. I don't think it's the best Stones album by a long shot, but it is really good. I mean, you listen to a couple of the tracks and you're thinking, Primal Scream were listening to this quite a lot, weren't they?
I mean, there's respect and there's plagiarism and there's just copycatting.
Robbery.
Or
should we say bobbery?
That's a good one. And you got Delia Smith in there as well. So
let's be having you, right?
I think as well there's 2 really good books. Chris Needs, the journalist, wrote Just a Shot Away. It's obviously part of the lyric from Give Me Shelter, so part 1 and part 2. So it's all about 1969. And he tracks through the backstory to this album quite a lot, as you can imagine, all the events that have been going on, and George mentioned some of that. So recommend those 2 books if anybody's interested.
Yep. Thanks for that.
I love it. It's got there's a bit of blues going on, bit of rock, bit of gospel, bit of blooming Cajun country as well at times. So I think a lot of slide guitar, bit of fiddle. What's not to like? And I think we talked about, what album was it? We did. It was Led Zeppelin. We talked about the classic album covers, the Royal Mail.
We did. Have you got it again?
Not again.
George is getting his money's worth out of this, is he not?
Absolutely.
Yeah, building your part up. So for Dickson, this is it's stamps, isn't it, John? Is that right?
Yeah, and I'll not be able to use these stamps in a couple of weeks' time when we go to the barcodes. So all of them.
Yeah, I managed to name them, most of them last time, didn't I? So yeah, it's on there for sure. Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, that's brilliant.
So I think it's a good album. I don't think by a long shot it's the best one.
What's the best one then?
Let's just leave that for the time being, and we'll see what else comes up.
Exile on fucking Main Street. That's the best album.
Well, we'll see if it comes on the list,
and we'll make a mean up on that.
What I would say on that point is that back to things being voted in and out. Sticky Fingers is 104 on the list at the moment, and it had been in the 100. So we've talked about some albums coming in and some coming out again. So I don't know why it's been back the way, but it was a kick in the teeth off being in the 100, which I guess arguably it should have been. So
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind Sticky Fingers should be in the top 100. No doubt.
And possibly better than Let It Bleed.
Yeah, you could make an argument for it.
Possibly. Okay, John, what else you want to add, mate? Number
Yeah,
1 in
probably-
the UK, number 3 in America. It's huge. Huge.
Yeah, very,
Knocked
very big album.
the Beatles off number 1 in
Mhm.
the UK album chart.
I think, so just again, I'll just leave you with a little bit of trivia. So Nanette Workman sang vocal. Do you know this?
I do, yeah.
Okay. She sang backing vocals in a couple of tracks, including Can't Always Get What You Want. But she also appeared in a British comedy show in 1971. Do you know what comedy show it was?
Who was this? Sorry, John, I never heard that.
Nanette Workman. She sings backing vocals in 2 of the tracks.
Is that
Right.
is that the same?
An American-Canadian singer. But she
She's
appeared in
a
a comedy show in 1971.
Go on.
Benny Hill.
Really?
Yep.
What was she doing in it? Do you know?
I believe she was singing a song, but yeah.
Yeah, and they were sort of parodying it or something, I guess, weren't they?
And it was when Benny Hill was filmed in black and white as well, apparently. Back
Right.
then.
There we go.
Useless trivia. But yeah, decent album. So
And was there not like a confusion on her name as well? Did they not? Was she not name checked as Nanette Newman or something like that
Right.
on
thought it was
the actress? Yeah.
Yeah, and it wasn't.
No, I don't think it was. Although it
No,
could have
it's
been.
definitely not Nanette Newman. She's
she,
very different.
she was, she was credited, and you wouldn't see Nanette Newman on Benny Hill for sure.
Absolutely not. Classic dame.
Classy Dave. Dickson, help us out here, mate. Get us back online. Rolling Stones, a fan, first of all? Are you good stuff
yeah.
you like? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
I haven't listened to them probably as much as I should have. I was always more of a Stones enthusiast over the Beatles. You know, if people asked you, are you Stones or Beatles, I would always go for the Stones. But I hadn't listened to this album in a long, long time. I couldn't even tell you the last time I listened to it until very recently. But yeah, I think it's really good. I'm pretty much echoing what the guys have already said. Give Me Shelter's a great song. I'd forgotten, like, there's really good harmonies in there. I'd forgotten actually how good a vocalist Mick Jagger can be. And was this album, was a lot of it recorded live?
I don't know, is the answer. It didn't have a long gestation period. I think they'd done some demos, and then when they brought them in, I think they recorded them fairly quickly.
Right.
I think they were quite happy as well. I think you mentioned before about some songs being written on tour. I think they wrote some songs in Italy. But those were kind of demos and stuff, hotel roomy stuff. But when they brought them in, I think the body of songs, as George says, you've got Jimmy Miller there saying, guys, you know, Beggar's Banquet was great. Are we on that path? And they said, absolutely, mate, we've got a bunch of stuff here. So I think, you know, that I'm sure they had other songs that didn't make it that, you know, probably could have done.
Yeah. It feels authentic. And I also feel like it's stood the test of time really well. And great bits of blues and, you know, traditional rock and roll, country. It's got swagger here and there. There's some nice changes in pace as well. You know, it's not all the same tempo throughout.
Yeah.
You know, there's a bit of texture there. Keeps you interested. And as John mentioned, the opening song and the closing song are really, really strong. So great top and tail.
So that's a
I don't
question.
know if really. Sorry?
Question for everyone then. So the recorded Country Honk and Honky Tonk Woman at the same time. Country Honk was recorded first, but Honky Tonk Woman was recorded, you know, at the same sessions or give or take. But Honky Tonk Woman came out first, obviously. And it was a big hit single and all that stuff. So there, Keith Richards' view was that, get this right, Country Honk was the song, and then they adapted it for Honky Tonk Woman. That makes sense. So what's your take on that? One's obviously a huge pop hit single, classic. One isn't. One's an album track. So
see, I've always had there's something about Honky Tonk Woman. It's sort of annoyed me over the years.
Is it the cowbell?
No, I don't mind the cowbell.
No.
More cowbell is what I say. No, it's the song speeds up. And I don't think it's deliberate. I think it if you listen to the start of the song and the end of the song, they're different tempos. And I don't think it's not like Midnight Rambler where it deliberately changes tempo. It's just they get more excited as the song's playing, and it gets faster. And that's always it's just annoyed me that it's one of my least favourite Stones hit records.
Hmm.
And one of the reasons is because it speeds up.
Okay. So Keith Richards is right then. Country Honk's the song, right? I guess. Original.
Well, just a wee seek back into Radiohead. They actually used cowbell on OK Computer as well.
Do they? What?
They do
Doing
on
what?
election.
Electioneering, right? Okay. Cool. Didn't know that. Okay.
Cool.
So you've got all this stuff rolling through it. As you've all said, there's some iconic songs on there. You've got the top and tail starting bookending the album's fantastic, I think.
Yeah, the choir's brilliant.
They get the
The
choir
title
on
track-
it.
The title track's really good. Let It
I was
Bleed's a
going to
great
say
song.
that on the album, I think that was the last track inside one, I think. Which
It's a great song.
it's beautiful, brilliant song, and
Yeah.
doesn't get mentioned a lot. So
Doesn't it's sort of one of the forgotten classic Stone songs.
Yeah.
I know do you know the choir asked to be disassociated with the record, yeah?
Because
No, I
of the
never knew
drug,
that.
because of the
How was
drug
that?
association.
Yeah.
All
They said
right.
there was a persistent, pervasive culture of drug association or something along those lines, right? So
Didn't they know that before they
Drug and
hooked up with the
behavioural.
Rolling
Yeah,
fucking
well,
Stone? One of the
who-
guys just died. Bottom of the swimming pool. Keith
Uh,
Richards is his tits.
and
One guy.
two shout outs here. One obviously to Mick Taylor. We actually had a very kind of quick Twitter chat. I think it was like last weekend. I think we had because somebody talked about how good Mick Taylor was, and we had a little
That's
bit of a
cool.
vote about albums better or worse without Mick Taylor, and I think general consensus was better with.
Well, he's only on 2 tracks in this. He's
He
only
is.
plays in 2 tracks.
But he was playing, but he was also playing live by this point. He played at
Yeah,
Hyde Park and all those other things that
yeah.
were coming through, and then from Sticky Fingers into I
Onward
think
Then.
rock and roll. I think he was hanging about, and then he was out. He was around for the start of rock and roll, but again he didn't finish the album. They sort of fell out and stuff. The opposite of Beggars. Sorry, this one where he did some of it. Yeah,
About 5 or 6 years, and that's
Yeah.
probably their absolute zenith.
and also a shout out for Ian Stewart, of course, as George mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
from Pit and Meme, for no
Pit
other
and Meme,
reason.
man.
Yeah, so got to give a shout out to that, right? And
Pit and Meme, that's near Falkirk, isn't it?
Yeah, just next door.
We
Just next
special
door by
guys.
about an hour and a half. Aye.
and also they had what Lester Bangs, the sort of famous music
Yeah.
journalist, he says, quote unquote, at the time it was the best rock concert record ever released, which was Get Your Yayas Out.
Yeah, is it? Yeah.
1970, so that they dropped that in between the studio albums that they were sort of knocking out and stuff. So they were on a run. They're on a run. The ultimate thing, just I guess for me, maybe all totally aware of it, but I actually went back. We've had a wee bit of time to do this episode, so I actually went back and watched Gimme Shelter, the sort of documentary.
Yeah, the Mills brothers.
Pretty sure I'd watched it, but I didn't remember a lot about it. But I didn't realise that they actually show Mick Jagger on a freeze frame the moment where the Hell's Angel stabs Meredith Hunter. They actually show it, and they do it like frame by frame.
Pretty shocking. It
Shocking,
really is quite
fascinatingly shocking.
Yeah.
And again, I would encourage you to watch it just for that. But if you're looking to get a full understanding of what they're talking about and what happened at the concert, I mean, the documentary actually catches it. It pulls no punches. It's very much there. So, which was very interesting for me. They also had a concert clause on segregation, the same as the Beatles did. Actually, they wouldn't play anywhere in America that was segregated. And they could fine the venues if they subsequently tried to do it. And so, a lot of time for guys like that stuck to what they believed in, and they obviously had that big R&B backstory and what have you. Miami Steve Van Dance from Springsteen's World, who got a bit of time for, said it was the greatest run of albums in history. You can take a view on that. and obviously we just
I think
lost.
you've got a good case on it. It's like from 68 to about 72. You've got not a misstep from the Rolling Stones sonically.
Agree
Made a
with
couple of mistakes off stage, but on stage and in the studio, no.
Don't we all make mistakes, mate? 42 minutes, 9 tracks, 68% Twitter yes, George 32% idiots. And the guys were all very positive about it. I don't think, and for Stephen was undecided. Didn't think it was. His argument was if there was going to be a couple of Stones albums on it, I would maybe rather there was a couple of different ones. But that was his view. Everyone else was positive. I just want to double back slightly on Lisa because she actually asked me to say this, and I was talking about the Radiohead album. So she says it was brilliant, groundbreaking, rich, layered, complex, emotional exploration of the human existence. Never tire of listening to it, and I want to thank Brendan Semple who gifted me the CD for my birthday many moons ago. So, which I thought was nice. Obviously, it wasn't James that bought it.
No.
And to be back or
Not
something, wouldn't it?
Not enough keyboard on it.
Not enough piano on it for James. And she was a big fan, of course. She said it's iconic, as did the other guys. Okay, so to round us off on this one, Dickson, what we saying, mate?
Yeah, it was great to revisit it after a massive gap, but it's definitely a yes from me.
Perfect. John?
Yes for me.
George?
100% in for me.
100% in, mate, and I'm absolutely yes. And Stephen was only, I think if he'd been on, he'd probably come on and say yes as well. So that's almost another full house again. So brilliant, thanks for that. So that gives us, at the moment, we've got Prince, Radiohead and Stones are all in at the moment. Nas and Tribe Called Quest are out. Another 3 voted on. As it stands right now at the end of this podcast, we've still never voted 5 albums on any podcast. So we'll see as we're nudging up. I always thought we'd start to nudge up, but I've had a look at the next 5 and I've got my doubts again that we're going to vote them all in. So
Are you going to give us a wee heads up as to what's coming next?
Absolutely. So 2 things before I do that. One is obviously to thank Dickson for coming on, because we love him guests on. It's fantastic, and love to hear the perspective on guys who know their stuff. And also, just as I read the next 5 out, we've asked you for an album nomination, if you remember, for us to consider along with the other stuff that we're going to do. So are you ready to put your cards on the table for that one?
Yeah.
Go on then. So your album nomination is what and why?
Boko Fish by Underworld.
Wow.
And why? Because that's probably the best dance album of the last 20 years.
Wow.
And I think sort of similar to what I said about Tom York. I think Carol Hyde's lyrics are just so intriguing. And it's obviously a completely different style of music.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's a bad note on that album. And I don't know if you've covered or you will be covering any dance albums, but I think it's seminal.
It's a great question. At the top of my head, I don't think we've had a classic dance album, certainly not a UK one. And I need to check the list, but I don't remember anything jumping out at me that would be in that genre.
We'll get any ABBA. I love a wee boogie to ABBA.
I hope so.
Oh, no.
I hope so, mate, but I have my doubts again. I have my doubts. That's fantastic, mate. So we've got such an eclectic mix from that. So remind us, so David gave us Bobby Gentry, I think.
Bobby Gentry, yeah.
Chris gave us Ricky Lee Jones,
yep.
And Graham gave us Dennis Wilson.
Yeah.
Pacific Ocean Blues.
Pacific Ocean Blue, yeah.
So there we go. Talk about eclectic, right? So what we'll do, Dickson, we've got all these gaps obviously creating on the list. So when we get to the end, we're all going to nominate some records to get voted on, and obviously the guests' records will go on that as well. So we'll let you know when it's getting chatted about. Okay, mate.
Thank you.
Cool and brilliant, and thanks again, mate. Really appreciate that. So the next 5
thank
you, very welcome. We'll be reviewing are The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust, Remaining Light, Talking Heads,
Classic,
Blonde and Blonde, Bob Dylan, The Chronic, Dr. Dre, and Off the Wall, Michael Jackson.
That should be an interesting one.
So Dickson, what we'll do, if you're okay with that, we do give the guys the chance to vote offline on all subsequent podcast. So we'll certainly get that list to you again, and you can have a think about it
Okay,
and give us
cool.
your votes. You're very welcome.
Thanks.
So you don't escape that easy. So that's my next 5, guys. Again, we'll probably wait a little bit because we're obviously in the middle of summer and stuff, and I know we've all got some breaks to have. So have we missed anything tonight? Any final thoughts or comments?
No, probably just the thing I sent you earlier. Are
Yeah.
you friends with Martin?
I'm not. No.
Right. I'll maybe say you'll friend request them or something.
I can do that.
How
Sure.
do the
Yeah, I'll pick that up with you, John. I've got another guest who has very kindly agreed to join us, which is fantastic. So we'll just need to find a way of getting some diary time that works for them. I've got a few more as well to bring on, and I think as the albums get a bit more bigger, if you want, hopefully there'll be 1 or 2 more guys will come and join us too. So as ever, guys, really appreciate your time. I know how busy everyone is, and there's some holidays and stuff to have. So go and have your holidays, enjoy yourself, and we'll all catch up very soon. Okay. Thanks again. Take care.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks, Brian.
All the best,
See you
guys.
later.
Thank you.
Cheers.